I think we jump to call people crazy, but we don't really know the background for where they're coming from,
Mm.
that would even suggest that such a statement was made. Now that you might disagree with that, but I think
They
there's just a
do.
way
There's a lot of
to
people who do.
there's a way to go about it, right? I mean, we all have a decision in that, and we all have the right to make a decision about that.
We
I mean,
do.
God gives us that, right?
We
Since
do.
the beginning.
What I'm seeing from you all's generation is there's a little bit of a challenge because people will say you're either a liberal Christian,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
If you will have those conversations and you don't come down hard on people, you're a liberal. No, no, I just want the gospel to come through. Or they'll tell you that, you practice something other than Christianity, or they tell you that, you have to understand righteousness. I feel like all of that is understood. Um, but when you guys hear that, when somebody's telling you that you're liberal, instead of sitting with somebody, because you told me a story too about even just a person who you're working with who was from the LGBTQ community and you were spending time with her. And this is when we first met. And I remember our
Right.
conversation, right? I remember our conversation.
Right.
So just in the next few minutes, man, how do you see um what's happening in culture like that? Do you feel like enough young people, do you feel like there's compromise in that space and no change, and that everybody has to be more stern? Or what are your thoughts about how this whole thing is coming together?
Yeah, I think, man, that's actually a good point. You brought that conversation up because actually, this was kind of when I started to step out more about my faith to other people, being more outspoken about it, being more kind of stand up with it. And this was somebody that I never really knew. I wasn't equipped, I'll say that, to really have a conversation with someone like that, man. And she's a dear friend, man. She was amazing. She's an amazing person, right? I mean, we never had any rift, any differences when she first let me know that this was her decision and where her sexuality lies and all of those good things. And so, man, we had that conversation, and it took a big turn quickly, but it was because I didn't know how to really share the gospel in a way or reach her in a way that was effective. And so I think a lot of people, I think they just come in with a lot of assumptions, man. I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot, but these assumptions aren't like out of the blue. I think we jump to call people crazy, but we don't really know the background for where they're coming from,
Mm,
that would even suggest that such a statement was made. And
mm,
so they see a lot of people who respond to their sexuality. They respond to what they like, what they enjoy, the lifestyle that they live. And the first thing that comes out of their mouth is condemnation. The first thing that comes in the mouth is, oh, you don't want to go to hell. You don't want to do this. You don't want to do that.
right.
And it turns into a quick neglecting factor, right? Like, I don't know about you, but I don't want somebody coming to my front door or being in my personal space and all they're telling me is how I'm living is going to result in hell. Now that you might disagree with that, but I think
They
there's just a
do.
way
There's a lot of
to
people
there's a
who
way
do.
there's a way to go about it, right? I mean, this street preaching tactic, it just doesn't, it's not beneficial in the long run. Again, like, you're scaring people into these spaces, but they don't know why they're doing it, just like they didn't know why they believed what they believed before you encountered them. And so I think there's a mixture of that. I think there, obviously, you can say there's misunderstandings. You can say that there aren't as great examples. I think in a lot of ways there's a compromise because you have people that aren't really walking out the transformed life that this faith that the faith grants you. There's a lot of watering down. There's a lot of spaces. And when I say watering down, I don't mean um, the approach of people are being kind and people are being loving, because that's not watering down. That's what we're called to do. I think there is a watering down in the sense that there are people who are proclaiming Christ, but man, they don't really look too different from the people that they're saying they're trying to reach. And so there's some compromise there,
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
aren't really too sure if we're confident enough to walk out our faith. And so there's some things there that we have to address. We have to pull some roots from, and really look at and be honest with ourselves, right? I know we had a conversation on the other platform that we're part of. Man, the appetites you give into, um, the things that you're making room for, that is really not helping your relationship with God, but it's tearing it down. And so we have to be willing to sit down and ask ourselves, like, what is this benefiting for the purpose and calling I have for my life? What is the risk if I don't start applying the faith where I'm weak right now, right? And being able to get into the groove of that. So between that, people are real caught up in labels. People are real caught up in what they're called, what they're labeled as, and I think that throws a lot of wrenches in there too,
Yeah. Yeah.
because we're more concerned about being considered a part of this group
Yeah.
than actually just clearing the air, man, and really getting to the truth about everything. There's no room for conversation in a lot of spaces anymore, man. There are people who are coming in, and instead of asking questions, we're just condemning you for what you live, and then at the same time they're condemning you for how you live, and so it's a shouting match, and there's no one able to sit down and just get to the bottom of it. I think we have to understand from a perspective of a believer, and you may not be a believer listening to this and catching this, but we can disagree theologically, and I can still see you as a human being who
Yeah.
has value, who has purpose, and who is created in the image and likeness of God. Whether you know or agree with that or not, that's how I approach you. And so, because of that, and because I know the life I lived before I came to Christ, ooh, and because I know
Yeah.
because I know how much grace and love He's given me to get to the point where I am in my walk, how dare I approach you, and such an arrogant, selfish, holy roller and pearl pusher manner? How dare I, right? Because it just doesn't, it's not beneficial. I don't appreciate anybody shoving anything down my throat. So why would I then approach you in that same manner? And some of you, oh, you're too soft. You're not sharing the gospel. You're not putting your foot down. But look where that's gotten us in doing that, right? There's a difference between teaching and preaching a message of truth and then going and condemning people for the lives that they currently live with these low key expectations that they're supposed to live up to, that they have no idea about. So, labelings, assumptions, horrible examples that they've been in front of. You've got a lot of misinformation spread around. And then you just got people that are just caught up in really what they want to do. I've met people, and it blew my mind how this individual, man, nice guy, awesome person, man, but he spent time studying. He did theology. He went through it all, and we're having a conversation, and he's like, yeah, but man, I just chose to not go with it, not agree
Right.
with it, not follow it, and it blew my mind. I'm like, man, so you studied this, you know a lot about this, and yet you're like, I'm good. But it's because there are some people that just want to do what they want to do.
Period.
And we all have a decision in that. And we all have the right to make a decision about that.
We
I mean,
do.
God gives us that, right?
We
Since
do.
the beginning. Um, and so we have to be okay with people making the decisions for themselves because we made a decision for ourselves. But we
We
have
do.
to be sure that we're wearing the coat of Christ, right? Instead of going around and telling people how they should live and how they should go about doing things. And A, we aren't looking right in those areas we're suggesting. And then B, we're not moving in love. Scripture says, by this shall all men know that you're my disciples if you have love one for another. So that speaks to unity first and
Yeah.
foremost. And so it's hard to tell people, hey, you should come follow us, and we're not even unified. Okay, that's number one. But then number two, it's hard for people to hear a message of truth when you have no grace and love behind it. When you have no willingness to love them and to reach them where they are and talk about things that they care about and be invested in where they are, instead of trying to holy roller and pearl push them, man. There's no benefit. And that's why a lot of young people today have such a negative disdain towards Christianity specifically, because it's a lot of that. And they feel they don't feel safe. They don't
Yeah.
feel secure. They
Yeah.
don't feel as if they're heard and understood. they're just they tell their side of the story. And what does the other person do? Oh, well, you're going to hell. It's over for you. What does that
And
do?
man,